Hey, what's up? It's Flux with Fluxwithit.com, and here I'm taking a look at the Neutron Sound Orgone Accumulator retail module. Now, this is an updated version of the original Orgone Accumulator, which was offered really only as a DIY kit. This module has a few pretty major improvements on it. It's a triple complex wavetable oscillator, essentially, and you can scan through the wavetables using the scan button on here, or scan knob on here. Everything is CV-able and attenuverters for those controls. But in addition to what was available on the DIY version, you also have individual waveform CV inputs on here as well, so you can scan through the waveforms that are available up at the top here. So here we have a waveform oscillator here, and here. So we can blend between these using the scan. We can scan between them, and depending on what mode you're in, it'll quantize across them, or it'll morph between them and blend. And then over here we have a modulation oscillator, and we can select the frequency of that modulator. So this would be the waveform, this would be the frequency of it, and then we can go through our index of it. And in addition to that, we have individual effects for each of these oscillators, and you can enable them just by pressing the buttons on them, and you can increase or decrease the amount of the effect, make it positive or negative, and you also have CV control over that as well. In addition to being an oscillator, it's also a drum voice. So you press the FX button here and you can select between. So if I press effects and then I select this, we're now in drum mode, and it completely changes the module into a drum voice, a complex FM drum voice. And when you do that, you have two oscillators here and then two decays here. So this is oscillator 1 and its decay, oscillator 2 and its decay. And you can scroll through your waveforms, and you can get noise sources, different noise sources, digital noise sources, so you can pitch them. You still have control over your pitch, and you can also still affect those as well. In addition to that, you have the pulsar effect. You've got distortion modes and decimation, bit crushing. You can really dive into this module, and we could be here for days talking about everything that it can do. It's a very complex module. I was lucky enough to be a tester and have some input on the drum voice and the distortion modes on here. What's really cool about these effects of the distortions is you'll have things like bit crushing and rectifying depending on as you go positive and negative with your attenuverter. So you can kind of blend from one type of distortion into a completely different distortion, which is really cool. You've got your volt per octave input, which is obviously your pitch. Then you've got a reset, which is used for triggering off your drums or resetting waveforms. It does have a chord mode, and you can select through different chords. This is your main output here, and then you have your sub output, which is a pulse width modulation output as well. And I'll be doing a much more in-depth video when I get back from NAMM, but I just wanted to show you guys the Orgone Accumulator is here, and it is out now. It is shipping.
I'm using the Synthertech MIDI to CV module, and I have all this MIDI'd up to my Native Instruments machine and a MIDI controller. I'll use the mod wheel so that I can kind of illustrate how I can morph between the wavetables. When you plug into the scan output here, and I'll set each of these attenuverters to 0, and there's a dip switch behind here that will decide whether or not you have these normaled to each other or not. But right now, I'll just send this positive. Okay, and you can see that we have the scan all the way to A. There's A, B, C, and this is going to scan between these three wavetables. So I can decide just exactly which wavetable I want to be on, and that will allow me to kind of change the timbre of this thing. So if I set these all to the left, let's go ahead and hit play. So right now what we're doing is we're getting just a simple sine wave. This is a sine wave on here, but as I scroll up, you're going to see that we're changing the wavetables. oscillator. So let's go to, so now we're on oscillator B. When I go up here, we'll go up into these interesting noise sources. Now, depending on which mode you're in, it'll actually be smooth, it'll be like smooth transitions between the different waveforms. And of course, in other modes, it'll actually be quantized. And you want to read the manual, it'll show you which modes are which. Now, if I enable an effect, let's say I want to have some of this bit crushing going on here. As I turn the effect up, it's going to be wave folding to the right. And it's like a sample rate reduction to the left. Let's pull up an oscilloscope of that. Let's take a look at that again. So we're wave folding here. Kind of like a sample rate reduction here. And then I can select different versions here. So let's check this one out here. This is the Zor distortion. Now, what's also interesting about this module is not only do we have these different effect types, but there's also some kind of like pseudo polyphony going on here. We can actually make this thing go into like a chord mode. Oh, let's turn the effect on. Let's change the waveform so you can kind of hear this a little better. Through the effect amount, it changes which chord it's playing. We also have delay modes. While we're doing this, we also have the ability to do things like cross modulation, FM, And then there's a whole nother drum module inside of here as well that we could use. Now if we select here, we can go into the drum mode, and as it receives a trigger, what you can do is, we'll set this up, and we will send it a gate. Now what this mode does is basically you have two oscillators here, and it's an FM drum source, and you've got essentially one side of the drum and then the other side of the drum. So it can be like the beater and the shell, or like you can have the kick and, you know, the beater to the kick, or the ring out to the drum, and depending on how you set it up, you can get drastically different drum sounds. And these two here, so this is the decay for the first waveform, and then this is the decay for the second waveform. And of course, the controls for the drum mode are all detailed out very nicely in the manual as well. It completely changes the functionality of this module.